always need a plan, right? Well, Craig Lemoine wants to make sure that the planners helping you create your plan do not forget about what could one day become a valuable piece of that plan. Hi, and welcome to the American Farmland Owner Podcast. I'm Dave Price. Dr. Craig Lemoine is director of the financial planning program at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. He serves as an associate clinical professor teaching courses in risk management, retirement, and financial planning. He is teaching the future and current financial planners the importance of letting clients look at the possibility of agricultural land as part of their financial plan. Podcasts are part of this. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but first, what brought him here? I always like to ask people why. Like, why do they do this for a living? So, what is your why?
What is my why? I think that the world of financial services can do such good when people come at it from a client-centered framework. When we want to help the world around us, we find the best in financial advisors and the best in insurance agents and the best in registered reps. And so my why of education and career has really been to help people understand who they're working with as best as I can help. And I think we get better outcomes all around and make the world a little better for it.
Okay, so you do a podcast, you're on a university campus, which allows you to have research access, of course, too. You talk to groups. That's pretty diverse, right?
It's up there. It's fun. It's a neat job. I can't say I've had the same week twice in about 20 years. So, I mean, that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur and an academic together. I think when you are excited about opportunities, they are prolific and you pursue them and you pursue them well, and a lot of doors open. But yeah, it's kind of fun. And I know I don't think I've done the same thing for 2 weeks in a row now in a good 2 decades. It's really been a great career, but
Nice.
yeah, it's always different.
All right, so 20 years, that gives you a good chunk of time to kind of draw from here. And I'm curious, as you are talking to groups, individuals, students, all the above, how over that time do you think the wealth management, the financial planning side, how have you seen a shift in that they better understand where farmland could fit in that overall piece? Like, are you noticing something changing in 20 years?
Oh, we absolutely are in the era of all. I think what we found, and this is my perspective to be very clear, is when we kind of had the 2008 Great Recession, right? It shook up a lot of ideas about home ownership and maybe real estate ownership from the standpoint of, REIT type products, which had just gotten to be fairly popular from 99 to about 2008. You saw more and more private REITs and public REITs, and all of a sudden everything gets hammered a little bit and people take a step back. Then we've got COVID and we have very low interest rates. And we have very low interest rates, and we start to kind of see financial planning go, okay, well, there's a lot more money now than there was in wealth management. And we started to see there were still some arbitrage deal opportunities in land and real estate where we could invest, maybe institutionally, more so than we could with higher rates. And then weave that into land prices, I would say, just having the time of their lives for a number of reasons, right? Scarcity being one of them, demand being another one of them, efficiency, technology, growth, need. There's a ton of reasons that my buddy Bruce Sherrick gets into as far as why land values have gone. But you've got land values going up. You've got relatively cheap money. You've got an industry coming back from where we were. And then I think the final straw here, what I've picked up on and noticed, is a move towards alts down a level. Okay. So we used to say, okay, we're going to use alts and I'm using an exclusionary definition for alts, right? And alternative investments, and I'm using exclusionary, so kind of non-stock, non-bond, non-public mutual fund, right? So like everything else. We've always seen it institutionally. Pension funds, we wanted alt, right? And insurance company reserve accounts, we're going to be private equity. We're going to have some alts in there, private credit, those things. But we're seeing it down a level now. We're seeing family offices start to go, oh, we should have some farmland in our maybe direct ownership in our portfolio. We should have one-step ownership in our portfolio. Oh, we maybe could look at having real estate in this portfolio. And so you're seeing that one step down in the family office space. And what you're starting to then see is a step down from that. Investment advisors going, okay, well, my client's got a net worth of $2 to $5 million. There's a space in alts for them, right? And that, I think, that's a long answer to your question. But you are starting to see where we had alts broader. And farmland being one of those core alternative investments, I think you are starting to see some more excitement in the wealth management space. And I think that's kind of where you're starting to see some pickup. The other answer to your question is, as this industry continues to evolve from sales commission to fee asset, that evolution is probably gotten where it's going to go. But that plays in too, right? Because now my whole way of getting compensated is a little more neutral to product than it used to be. And I may be more open to the idea of introducing these ideas to customers. So you put all that together, you've got a world where people are starting to strike into non-stock and bond assets.
Are you sensing any hesitation where people look at the landscape right now and wonder if the good times have paused a bit and there's no way that the land can continue to appreciate like it has recently? Is there a pause?
I'll kind of answer that a little broader. I think the yield on land is fascinating to me, because the yield on land to someone farming the land or comfortable farming the land or has history and family and culture of farming the land is inevitably a little higher than the yield on land if I buy it, right? Because I don't know as much. My chance of arbitrage is a little less, and then just my ability to work on it myself is almost net, zero. Mm-hmm. So I think to that end, the opportunity is still there. Interest rates are higher, but that hasn't really stopped land values, and they haven't gone down. Mm-hmm. So, you're looking at something that historically is a very strong inflation kind of hedge. And you're looking at something that, does it make sense for me to borrow at 7 to have a yield of 3? Well, probably not. But at the same time, you don't have a lack of buyers in the land market. And only, I think, 1 or 2% of farmland changes hands in a year anyway. So you've got institutional demand hasn't changed. Family office style demand hasn't changed. More and more that 2 to 5 million demand, right, in America. Pair that up with this $90 trillion wealth transfer that we've read about from mm-hmm. boomers to other generations. And then that plays into okay, now I have liquidity I didn't have where I want to go invest it. I don't see land prices going down. I think maybe not rising as fast, but that could also be naive of me.
But as you know, there are many others who agree with you for all the factors that you brought out. You can't overlook scarcity.
No, you can't. And you can't overlook food, and you can't overlook humans, and you can't overlook that there's more humans every year. I mean, it's a fundamental relationship. And I think, my buddy Bruce Sherrick does a great conversation and research on the idea of, okay, as more of the world starts to eat meat, what do those animals eat? And those animals tend to eat grains. And so then that puts this bigger demand on grains as we increase the quality of proteins people have. In a nutshell, then, it goes back to growing those grains and then the value that we get out of that. So, no, I don't see land prices dropping. I don't know if they'll continue to escalate as fast, but the demand is huge, and it just keeps getting bigger.
What is your student makeup geographically?
So my student makeup, my role at the University of Illinois, I'm the director of their undergraduate financial planning program. So we teach people to be financial advisors, registered reps, broker-dealers, agents, or work within institutions like that. Students come out of our program able to sit for the CFP designation, and most of them do. And so we have a slightly different student makeup than most of the other College of Ag where we're housed. Mm-hmm. Our students are typically, I would say, about 70% urban. They're coming from Chicagoland or Chicago. We get some from about 30% rural. And I would say that's probably flipped for a lot of majors in the College of Ag. We're still fighting this 75% male, 25% female dynamic, which is sort of prominent in wealth management. But I do see the C's changing, and I think definitely a more female percentage is happening over time. You look at the College of Business, and so that's 50-50, right? So something's occurring there, and we're catching up. But that's pretty much our makeup. It's just a little flipped from that traditional ag kid. I would say we're much more Chicagoland, much less rural. But other than that, yeah, it's really a fun group. We have about 170 in our program as of the fall of the spring last year, and we'll probably be around 120 and then build up again from there as people graduate out, right?
I grew up in Illinois, so and was a slash Mizzou and Illini fan. So I did pay attention, and I did think I was about right and had looked at going there for undergrad, but there was a girl involved, and I stayed home, and whatever. We're not
Always
going to
does
get into
that, yeah.
There's
right.
always something in there, right? But the reason I asked you that is that I had wondered if your geographic proximity for these folks who come in with no ag background and maybe no real ag interest, if you will, especially the Chicago folks, the Chicagoland folks.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, then, do they get what they're surrounded with there, not just your ag side, which is so strong, but just the countryside, around campus, right? Like you don't have to go far to see good farmland. And so does that experience just by proximity then kind of get them thinking as they plan their financial planning careers?
I think absolutely. And I'll tell you two things. In the world of financial planning programs, right, there are some very big fish and there are smaller fish, and we're kind of on the way to big. I would put my students on a commodities and futures level up against anybody in this country. There is zero question in my mind that a University of Illinois financial planning grad knows more about commodities, futures contracts, that market than any of their competition out there, like hands down. I would also say that they have a pretty much better understanding of small business planning. I think because of their exposure to farms and the idea of LLCs and S corps and getting into the idea of general partnership versus limited partnerships and getting into C corp and S corp and the tax elements there, again, I would put mine at the top of that pile. And no question that their experience with the college, the world, Champaign, Urbana, that all plays into those statements. But I'm very solidly a believer that there are some elements that our students come out with that would put them at the top of anybody in this country to those two ends, small business ownership and then commodities and future contracts. There's no one even comes close.
So as you're training these folks for tomorrow, how do you help them know whether a client and farmland are a fit when you're talking about investing?
I mean, I think you have two ends of that, right? You've got someone that already owns it, works it, is part of it, and you've got somebody, in that rural world, and then you've got somebody that's saying, is this a good investment hedge in the alternative space? And those might be the same person, but you could look at that in two different elements altogether. If we're going to work with rural clients, we need to be trained to do that. We need to make sure that we have a mentor that helps us when we get out. We don't want to walk into our first meeting at a diner wearing a suit and tie the wrong time of year. That's a horrible
Right.
idea. We want mentorship. On the other side of the coin, you've got a student, maybe they go to an RIA space in Chicago, maybe they get hired on an investment team. Maybe 3 to 5 years down the line, they find themselves in an investment committee conversation. And that's where we start talking about, okay, well, let's evaluate anything from a REIT to a direct purchase to some private fund. And I think that, again, it's a mentorship track, right? I hope to give someone that level of planning where they're comfortable learning from there. But I do think both require a little more fine tuning on the back end before we're ready to jump into that. But I do see the world where they're going to be more comfortable with that than maybe somebody that came into this through traditionally selling life insurance in the city and then flips over to planning. I think a student from U of I is going to have a different perspective.
the sales pitch part of this is why this makes sense. Has that pitch changed at all? I mean, we've got certain sectors, you look at the hog industry, they've kind of gotten their butt kicked here lately, right? I mean, when you start really digging into specifics, but overall, the approach, anything different?
I would say this. One of the things I get to do, I'm blessed to be on the board of country companies. And one of the other guys on the board, he is a hog producer in Illinois, and he actually came up to me. We're at Distill, and we're having some appetizers in Bloomington, and we're having a great time. And he came up, and I've never heard it put so eloquently. He was like, "I got to staple a $50 bill on each hog that leaves that farm," and I was like, "That, sir, I mean, in a sentence, you just summed that up, right? Like, I understand now what you're getting at." But I think to the end of, is there a space for financial planning in agriculture? Absolutely, right? I mean, it is a niche. It is a, what, $4 trillion industry. It has its own challenges. You have a liquid asset so often, but yet you have sort of a limited cash flow compared to maybe a law firm or dental practice. So you need unique skills. You need unique skill sets to say, okay, I know that one day down the road, this thing's worth $30 million, but it's very much tied up in the ground beneath you. It's very much tied up in the infrastructure. There isn't the free cash flow we might normally associate with a $30 million operation. So when we look at that position, it changes everything from retirement plans we may want to do. We probably don't want to do a defined benefit plan because the cash flows are going to vary every year. It's not like a law firm where that would be the go-to. When we start thinking a little bit about even Social Security and tax and how we want to file and how much we want to pay people, it's actually different for farmers than it is for, let's say, me. So it's a unique world, and I think you're going to have ups and you're going to have downs and you're going to have high interest rates and you're going to have periods where it's very hard to do this. And I think that makes it even more important. Right? That we're stapling $50 on a hog when it goes out the door. I think we need to think about, okay, so this customer isn't one that I'm going to hit with a $5,000 flat planning fee, right? That's going to go out the door. So let's think of other ways we can work together, right? I think that, but the need is so strong, and it gets stronger as you have bigger problems. And those bigger problems, at the end of the day, we're looking at an uncertain future with our estate tax reform right now. The risk of things going back to much lower is there on the table, and you've got a lot of wealth tied up in land. I mean, there's puzzles to be solved here that absolutely need some clever thoughts.
So especially for those folks who are actively farming, how when you're talking to groups, when you're talking to both current and future financial planners here, how do you get them to understand the psyche? Because for all those things you laid out there, it's just a different beast when your wealth for so many is tied up in your land, and maybe the equipment too, to a different extent. But that's just you really have to wrap your head around there and truly understand what those folks are going through, right?
I think you absolutely do. And maybe you can't completely, but I think the conversation is often one of, estate attorneys cost money and life insurance costs money. And so when you look at it from the standpoint of a farmer or landowner who maybe does have that wealth but not the cash flow, the conversation I generally have is a very simple kind of case study. And I had the chance to do this at the Farm Expo a while back, and it was so much fun. And I love this opportunity to do this. But the idea was you're kind of having a conversation, and you've got two families, and you've got kind of, I don't know what I called them, family one, family two for this conversation. But the idea is you're like, okay, this family met with an attorney. It cost this much. And they had wills and trusts done, and it cost this much. And they actually bought life insurance, and it cost you this much. And this family didn't do those things. And you've got this idea of like, yeah, you're out tens of thousands of dollars, and it hurts and it sucks a little bit over here. But now let's move the clock. So you have the first spouse pass. And then you're like, okay, everything's kind of going the same, right? You've got this, and you had to redo the estate plan on the first person. They're spending more money now that it's one spouse. But then you get like 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years later, and the whole point of the exercise is the farm still there? And one of them it is, one of them's not. Is the family still going there for Thanksgiving? And one of them it is, one of them is not, right? And so to some extent, I think the goals and value and vision down the line help inform those conversations today. Life insurance gets a bad rap, right? Life insurance is sold, not bought. That phrase is used a lot, even by people selling it, which maybe they shouldn't say it like that, but here we are. But at the end of the day, there's not too much to create liquidity from an illiquid asset, right? There's not too many tools that we use to suddenly create cash needed to buy or pay tax or create a needed liquidity boost down the generational line. And so I think getting more comfortable with the idea that this is part of the process helps on the farmer side. On the advisor side, again, mentorship, right? I cannot stress that enough. You're 22, you have a degree in your hand, you still have a ton to learn. Mm-hmm. And I can't share enough that idea of mentorship. And when you've done it 100 times, it makes a lot more sense. You're a lot more comfortable. You can have better conversations.
Okay, so you've put together this entire training program, if you will, right? How does that all work?
So we've created at U of I the agriculture-focused financial planning designation, and it is aimed with one mission, and that is to better serve the agribusiness, farming, ranching community. So you want to better serve your clients. This is for you. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you the story of it if I can, and it's a little long, but I think it's worth telling. When I first got to the University of Illinois, it was 2018 or 19, somewhere in that range, and I'd been somewhere and done a lot of wealth management, financial planning education before at a place called the American College in Philly. But I get to U of I, and they hire me on and say, we want someone to run the program. We like you. We go back and forth. I work there. U of I comes to us in 2018-19. They're like, look, we know the demographics of higher ed are changing. We understand that the traditional model that we've used to support ourselves is going to require tweaking. What can we do in the professional space that would help bring in revenue and at the same time support the mission of what we're trying to do? That was, we were tasked with a puzzle. And if you solve the puzzle, you got a big old grant. So I go to solving the puzzle, and I said, well, what's out there in the world of wealth management and financial planning? And you looked around, and there were literally 6 divorce designations at the time. I was like, whoa, there's 6 ways to learn that. There's an infinite number of investment, like SEMA, CFA, invest, like from hard to not hard, like kind of designations out there. And there's an infinite number of insurance designations out there, but nothing in ag. And I was like, that is a $4 to $6 trillion industry, and there's really nothing there. And the reason there was nothing there, I learned later, was the bench strength it took to build this thing. So we kind of come up with a proposal. We're like, we think we should be able to train insurance agents, reps, and advisors to better serve ag, farm, rural families. We'd like to do that. The college said, great, here's some money, go get at it. And the first thing I did was I had a focus group of farmers, because where else would you start, right? So we go to the I Hotel in Urbana, and there's a nice table, and then people come in. There's a guy my age, and is at the time early 40s, and he literally has mud on his boots, like the top of his boots. He's got some mud on him. And he comes in, and he sits, and he's almost at the head of the table. And we start going around, well, what do we do well? And he doesn't say anything. And then he's and I go, okay, well, what do we not do well? And we go around the table, and it finally gets to him, and he's like, every time y'all come out, you just want to sell me life insurance. You never listen. And he used some profanities too, but I'll keep it clean. So you never listen. And I was like, that's the start of it, right? Because what does it take to ask the right questions? What does it take to listen? You have to understand so much to be able to listen, right? You need to know what you're talking about. You need to understand a lot of that world. And so that kind of set the stage for this whole thing. And then we had another focus group with a bunch of ag eco nerds and PhDs and whatnot. And then we had another focus group with financial advisors, and yet another focus group with kind of leadership of financial firms that would wind up approving or paying for this kind of thing. And in the end, we developed a kind of 35 chapter designation around the idea that to better serve, you really need to understand, and maybe through some communication skills in there too, because that was missing. And not to say life insurance isn't one of the answers here, but there's so much more than that. And I think going out and just leading with it is just awful. And let's stop doing that. And we've developed a really great curriculum around the idea of better serving this family. We've been working on it for 4 or 5 years now. And my comment to bench strength is we've got people from Purdue that helped us out. We've got Illinois, Ag Eco faculty, we've got crop science faculty helping us out. We have actual conversations with some folks at People's Company, and as far as like land values going up and down, we've got conversations with some private equity too in there. So like it's a cool designation. It's really fun, but it took a while to come together because we really wanted to get all the pieces and talk to the right people, and then we had to put it on a format that works for everybody.
Sure.
And now we've got it ready to go, and it's really been it's been an amazing journey to get here.
Nice. Before I let you go, I got to ask you about podcast and that you've developed here, kind of as an extension of everything you do, and probably an enjoyable extension too, I suppose, right?
So we have developed what we call the Land and Everything Else podcast. Same audience. We're looking at advisors, wealth managers. That's who we're trying to talk with, right? Advisors, wealth managers, financial planners, that crew. We do have some other people that have, tacked on. That's life, right? I'm sure there's yours as well. And the idea there is we will talk with people that invest in, work with, or experts around, land and everything else. So, as an example, one of our July episodes, we went to the Illinois Foundation. And we talked with one of their money managers, and we said, hey, when the foundation looks at investments, where does real estate fit? Where does land fit? What if someone gives land to the university? Do they keep it? How do they work with it, right? And so that kind of conversation, then we do a couple of things with it. First off, we're very happy to share that with the world. But secondly, we also use it in the classroom. So let's say that there's a great 5 minutes with Jeremy, and he talks about if someone gives land to the foundation and what their steps are, right? We can take that 5 minutes and put it in our estate planning class. And we can say, hey, all right, today before the lecture, please watch this 5 minutes of content. Sure. We can take that 5 minutes and put it in our ag designation. We can take that 5 minutes and put it in even like a Coursera public facing class. So the reason we've been able to pay for the podcast, as you know, that they're not cheap to put on, is being able to say, okay, well, we're going to take this content and use it in 3 or 4 places.
Sure.
And we don't use the whole 30 minutes in 3 or 4 places, but we use these key pieces. And then I can go to my students and say, all right, you've got 10 experts in this area. I want you to listen to what they all have to say about this, and we're going to have class. And it opens up doors and windows to education. It also lets me focus on the content without really caring about the numbers, because it's great that people listen, but I'm not going to kill myself for 1 million downloads either, because my goal is I could put this in 3 classes. Oh, that's a win, right? That's the win for me. So that's kind of what we've done, and the philosophy behind it, maybe why it's a little more nerdy than some others.
I think with age, though, in high school, you didn't want to be called a geek or a nerd, right? I think that's the value of adulthood, right? You got to embrace who you are. Yeah, at least that's my excuse.
I think you're dead on with that, right? Like I love the idea of having somebody on to talk about land values before, during, and after different interest rate periods and stuff, right? And that's niche. But man, if you're a financial advisor and you hear that and then you go out and talk to somebody, you're going to do a lot better job.
For sure. For sure. Hey, thank you much. We've covered a bunch. We really appreciate the perspective.
Thank you, Dave. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me on.
He is Dr. Craig Lemoine, Director of the Financial Planning Program at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. For more on his background and his podcast, you can head to AmericanFarmlandOwner.com, the place where landowners get their news. And while you're there, sign up for the free weekly American Farmland Owner newsletter. You'll find links to our podcast there. We'll give you more background on our podcast guests, plus you get the big developments of the week for farmland owners, operators, and investors all in one place. AmericanFarmlandOwner.com. Just sign up there. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for caring about the future of our farmland.